Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we sift through layers of material to bring you concentrated, essential knowledge. Today, we are undertaking quite a deep exploration of a true cinematic enigma, a performer whose dedication, really, to character became both his greatest triumph and, well, his professional burden, Val Kilmer.
It's a really compelling mission, actually, because his career arc is just defined by these radical extremes.
Yeah.
You have this extraordinary versatility, moving seamlessly between comedy, drama, action, fantasy, westerns, sci-fi. Yet he always seemed to operate just sort of outside the mainstream critical adoration he arguably deserved.
Exactly. We are charting his life from 1959 right through to 2025, following his path as, well, an artist, an iconoclast, and ultimately a survivor who literally had to fight to reclaim his voice. And to set the stage for this paradox, let's look back to a 1992 remark by Roger Ebert. He stated, if there is an award for the most unsung leading man of his generation, Kilmer should get it.
And that phrase, just encapsulates the entire narrative we're about to explore. Kilmer was a huge star. He anchored films that, collectively grossed billions worldwide, yet he was rarely viewed purely as a leading man in the mold of, say, his contemporaries. He was always defined by the transformation, right? The difficulty of his process, that intense reputation. He was kind of the star who hid inside the character, and maybe Hollywood never quite forgave him for that.
Okay, let's unpack the foundations then. This singular talent, starting right at the beginning, Val Edward Kilmer, born December 31st, 1959 in Los Angeles. What context did the sources give us for his early life and background?
Well, his formative years were certainly shaped by a pretty diverse heritage and maybe an unstable family life, too. His mother, Gladys, she was of Swedish descent, and his father, Eugene, an industrialist, a developer, he had a mix of Irish, German, and Cherokee roots.
Right.
The family moved to the San Fernando Valley, but, his parents divorced when he was only 8. So that contrast, Hollywood proximity and personal turbulence, it sort of set an early pattern.
And we know that a really profound personal tragedy marked his adolescence, something many believe fueled that intensity we see later in his acting.
Yes, a truly devastating loss. His younger brother, Wesley, suffered from epilepsy. He drowned in a hot tub in 1977. He was only 16.
Wow.
And the sources consistently point to this event as just a critical turning point, like a shadow of grief maybe, and a driving intensity that you feel is often channeled directly into his dedication to the craft. When you look at that almost haunted quality he brought to roles like, say, Doc Holliday, you can almost see that early, profound personal experience reflected there.
And compounding that intensity was this deep connection to his faith, which, as you mentioned, becomes absolutely crucial in the final chapters of his life.
That's right. He was raised in the beliefs of Christian Science. And it was a faith he maintained with really extraordinary conviction throughout his adult life. This religion, it emphasizes spiritual healing, the power of prayer.
Yeah.
It provided a bedrock of belief, sure, but it later complicated his medical choices in a way few public figures have ever really experienced.
Before he was, dodging missiles in Top Gun, he was a serious student of the stage. Attended Chatsworth High School, ran a pretty accomplished crowd. Kevin Spacey was there, dated actress Mare Winningham. But his true academic achievement came next.
Yeah, that was the Juilliard milestone. He became, at the time, the youngest person ever accepted into the prestigious Juilliard School's drama division.
Yeah.
Group 10.
Wow.
And this isn't just incidental. It immediately positioned him as this dedicated, classically trained craftsman, operating on a different artistic plane than a lot of the contemporary Hollywood hopefuls.
And here's where that intensity maybe first led to a bit of professional friction, even among friends. The sources note his close friendship with Kevin Spacey started at Juilliard. It came to a pretty abrupt end over a financial matter from their student days.
Yeah, it speaks volumes, doesn't it? Even that foundational early environment, the complexity and maybe the uncompromising nature of his character were already pretty evident. He seems like a man of fierce commitments, and the boundaries of those commitments, whether artistic or personal, were just rigid. This early rift over money with a peer, it kind of foreshadows the later, larger reputation he'd gained for being difficult in professional settings. The man just didn't compromise easily.
So this dedication to classical training, it fundamentally defined his early career choices, didn't it? He was really a theater actor that Hollywood tried to turn into a movie star.
That distinction is so key. His first major crossroads decision is almost unbelievable when you look back. In 1983, he declined a role in Francis Ford Coppola's The Outsiders.
Wait. He turned down Coppola, the director who launched careers like Tom Cruise, Matt Dillon, Patrick Swayze, all because of prior commitment.
Precisely. He chose to honor his prior commitment to the stage. specifically appearing off-Broadway in The Slap Boys in '83, alongside other emerging talents like Kevin Bacon and Sean Penn.
Right.
So while The Outsiders became this huge launching pad for so many of his contemporaries, Kilmer prioritized the discipline, the craft of stage work. It really cemented his identity as an artist with this internal artistic hierarchy that just didn't put commercial film success above everything else. He did admit later he probably wouldn't make that same choice again, but it really underscores who he was at the time.
His first non-commercial screen acting role, an ABC after-school special called One Too Many, co-starred Michelle Pfeiffer. And this period inspired a really unusual creative endeavor.
Yeah, his artistic output just couldn't be contained by acting alone, apparently.
Hmm.
He self-published a collection of his own poetry called My Edens After Burns. Poetry, yeah. The contents included poems inspired by his time with Pfeiffer. And this is such a classic Val Kilmer detail, isn't it? A young actor on the verge of superstardom self-publishing rare, intense poetry. That book is now a genuine collector's item. Secondhand copies reportedly fetch like $300 and up. It just shows an artist constantly creating, even outside any commercial demand.
The public, though, first saw his charisma not through intense drama, but through pure, unadulterated comedy in that 1984 spy spoof Top Secret.
Top Secret. Yeah, it showcased his range immediately. He got top billing as Nick Revers, the American rock and roll star. And in a move that just demonstrates his full commitment to character immersion, even in a parody, he didn't just act. He sang all the songs in the film. Wow! Which led to the very unusual decision to release an album under his character's name. It just demonstrated this willingness to go all in, whether it was for Shakespeare or, slapstick. He followed that up quickly with the lead in the 1985 comedy Real Genius.
But the shift to global stardom, that required a move away from comedy. He first turned down David Lynch's surrealist masterpiece, Blue Velvet, before being cast in the film. That really made him a global household name.
That transition came in 1986 with Top Gun. He was cast as Lieutenant Tom Iceman Kazansky, the rigid, highly skilled foil to Tom Cruise's Maverick.
Iceman.
The Iceman. Top Gun was just a cultural phenomenon, right?
Right.
Grossed over $344 million worldwide, instantly shifting Kilmer from this respected theater and comedy actor to a bona fide major Hollywood leading man. And that tension he brought to Iceman, that simmering, contained intensity, it was a perfect precursor to the more complex roles that were coming.
So the late 80s, including Willow, where he met his future wife, Joanne Whalley, that really cemented him as a viable star. But the period between, say, 1990 and 1995, that's where Kilmer demonstrated this almost chameleon-like ability to inhabit iconic figures through extreme, almost obsessive preparation. This is where that Juilliard commitment really paid off, you feel.
Oh, this period is just a masterclass in method acting. It shows how his pursuit of authenticity often overshadowed the actual fame or the salary. He wasn't just playing characters. He was seeking to, channel historical figures.
Okay, let's start with the role that really redefined his ability to transform. Playing Jim Morrison in Oliver Stone's 1991 film The Doors. The preparation for this role, it's become legendary in Hollywood history.
It was an exhaustive commitment. I mean, the sources say that before he even got the part, Kilmer memorized the lyrics to all of Morrison's songs.
All of them.
All of them. He recorded himself singing, sent the tape to Oliver Stone, just demonstrating this proactive dedication that went way beyond a standard audition. Stone, apparently, though initially skeptical, was won over by just the pure sonic accuracy.
And the preparation wasn't just musical, it was deeply psychological, too. Kilmer actually voiced some significant concerns about the narrative direction of the film early on.
Yeah, he argued pretty fiercely with Stone about how Morrison should be portrayed. Kilmer was worried, apparently, about the film purely promoting substance abuse. He believed that Morrison picked the wrong heroes. He insisted the film needed to tell the story in, 1,000 different ways, focusing on the creative genius and the complexity, rather than just reducing Morrison solely to his drug use. And Stone ultimately agreed to incorporate that perspective, which shows Kilmer's intensity was often used to protect the artistic integrity of the character he was playing.
So once cast, he basically became Jim Morrison, the physical, the emotional immersion. It lasted nearly a year before filming even started.
12 months, yeah.
Yeah.
He dressed in Morrison-like leather and snakeskin clothes, lived on a similar schedule, apparently frequented Morrison's old haunts along the Sunset Strip just to fully absorb the environment. That's the definition of deep dive method acting, right? Erasing your own identity to become the subject.
And here's where the preparation truly became transformative. The voice channeling.
It was startlingly accurate. The musical results were so convincing that members of the Doors themselves struggled to tell the difference.
Really?
Yeah. Paul Rothchild, the band's original producer, decided to test this accuracy. He played Kilmer's version of the song The End for Doors guitarist Robbie Krieger,
Okay.
who, without prompting, believed it was a long-lost recording of Jim Morrison they'd just forgotten about.
Oh.
I mean, the ability to fool the subject's own bandmates, that's perhaps the highest validation you can get for that level of total transformation.
We should note, though, that while Kilmer's performance itself was hailed, the overall interpretation of Morrison by Stone, that was met with some skepticism from within the band itself.
That's a really crucial distinction. Doors keyboardist Ray Manzarek was reportedly, let's say, less than enthusiastic about Stone's final vision. He felt it focused too much on the dark side of Morrison. And this is kind of a recurring pattern in Kilmer's career, isn't it? His specific performance might be flawless, but the friction often occurred between his uncompromising commitment and, well, the compromises inherent in large-scale filmmaking.
So that total immersion in rock iconography, it really set the stage for his next great character transformation, which required him to master a different kind of performance art, classical piano, for his legendary turn as Doc Holliday.
Ah, Tombstone, 1993. This gave us arguably his most critically adored performance, his portrayal of the terminally ill sardonic gambler Doc Holliday opposite Kurt Russell. This is maybe his defining cinematic achievement, and it provides the perfect anecdote, really, for his, let's call it, pathological dedication.
Okay, here's the detail that makes you truly appreciate his process. Doc Holliday has this scene where he plays Chopin's Nocturne in E minor, Opus 72, number 1. Kilmer did not play the piano at all.
Not a note. And yet he practiced that one specific classical piece for months in preparation.
Months.
Months. He wasn't just faking the hand movements. He was working to master the fingering, the emotion of the music.
Yeah.
Purely for a single nonverbal scene that lasts, what, less than 3 minutes.
Incredible.
That kind of profound investment in minute detail just encapsulates the Kilmer methodology. It wasn't about the close-up. It was about the internal authenticity for him.
He continued entering into key collaborations during this really productive phase. He teamed up with Top Gun director Tony Scott again for that cameo as Elvis Presley in True Romance, written by Quentin Tarantino.
Right.
And of course, in 1995, he took on an iconic role opposite two absolute giants of acting.
That would be Michael Mann's sprawling crime masterpiece, Heat, 1995. Starring opposite Al Pacino and Robert De Niro, Kilmer played the high-strung, conflicted Chris Shirley's. Heat is just considered one of the best crime dramas ever made, and his ability to hold the screen, matching the intensity and detail of two legendary method actors, it really showcased his arrival as an undisputed force of screen presence.
So, despite the incredible artistic success of Heat, the defining pop culture moment of 1995 for him was definitely when Kilmer donned the cowl. The story of his casting as Batman Bruce Wayne and Batman Forever is, well, it's one of Hollywood chaos.
Oh, it was a total whirlwind decision. Director Joel Schumacher was apparently utterly convinced by his Doc Holliday performance. He believed Kilmer had that perfect blend of intensity and hidden anguish required for Bruce Wayne.
The pressure must have been immense. Michael Keaton, who really defined the role for a generation, had just dropped out in July 94 due to creative differences. The studio needed a massive star, and fast.
Kilmer was cast just days after Keaton officially exited. And this is the surprising part, especially given his usual obsessive preparation. Kilmer took the role without reading the script and without even knowing who the new director was.
Really? No script?
Apparently not, which contrasts so sharply with his measured choice to turn down The Outsiders years earlier. Maybe it just shows the undeniable pull of playing such a massive cultural icon.
The film itself, huge commercial success at the box office, right? Yet Kilmer's performance proved pretty divisive. How did critics and audiences react to his interpretation?
Yeah, it was really split down the middle. Janet Maslin, among others, found him a poor, maybe too moody successor to Keaton's kind of internalized eccentricities. But others really praised his darker take. Critically, Batman co-creator Bob Kane himself publicly stated that he felt Kilmer had delivered the best interpretation of Batman up to that point.
Bob Kane said that.
Bob Kane himself. He specifically praised how Kilmer balanced the brooding intensity of the Bat with the more playful aspects of Bruce Wayne.
Yet, despite the success, despite the high praise from the source material's creator, Kilmer decided to exit after just one film, opted not to return for Batman and Robin in '97. That seems like a baffling commercial decision on the surface.
Well, his exit was multifaceted, but it ultimately seems to tie back to his core artistic integrity. First, he faced a scheduling conflict with his next major project, The Saint. Second, and maybe more tellingly, reports indicate he felt the character of Batman was being marginalized in favor of the villains, specifically Jim Carrey's Riddler and Tommy Lee Jones's Two-Face.
Oh, okay.
For Kilmer, the performance centered on Bruce Wayne's psychological state, and if the hero became merely a straight man for the spectacle, he just lost interest.
And finally, there was that widely reported friction with director Joel Schumacher, who later used some pretty sharp language to describe the relationship.
Schumacher called Kilmer childish and impossible, confirming the working relationship was strained, to say the least. For a method actor who thrives on intense internal focus, the fast-paced, effects-driven environment of a franchise sequel, especially one where he felt his character was losing thematic importance, was probably just incompatible with his process.
So the late 90s and early 2000s saw Kilmer continue his pattern of radical versatility, even as he commanded massive salaries, reportedly $6 million for The Saint. But this period also really formalized his reputation as the, quote, difficult genius of Hollywood, a reputation that often overshadowed his actual work.
Yeah, this contrast between the artistic brilliance and the professional friction, it's the absolute definition of his career paradox. He was constantly delivering this intricate, detailed work, but simultaneously battling a perception that he was just
Let's look at the range, though. In 1997, he embraced the role of Simon Templar in The Saint.
Kilmer apparently looked forward to The Saint, precisely because it allowed him to leverage his skill for deep transformation. The character's a master of disguise, right?
Right.
Which meant Kilmer got to play multiple chameleon characters within the same film. A mad artist, a nerdy British scientist, a cleaner, a Russian mob boss. It was like a playground for his technical acting skill. And again, he infused the project with his own creativity. The sources note Kilmer actually wrote the poetry featured in the film.
We wrote the poetry. Again.
Again.
Yeah.
Seems to be a theme. He also entered the world of animation, providing the voices of both Moses and God in the critically acclaimed 1998 animated film The Prince of Egypt.
Moses and God, that's quite a range in one film.
Indeed. But when he reflected on his hardest acting challenges up to that point, it wasn't a blockbuster or a historical epic.
No. What was it?
It was the 1999 drama At First Sight. He played Virgil Adamson, a blind man who undergoes a sight restoring operation. Kilmer stated this was the most challenging role he had undertaken, which suggests that, technical difficulty and deep emotional truth rather than commercial reach were his real metrics for success.
The 2000s were marked by these critical darlings that often fell flat commercially. He starred in the notorious box office disaster Red Planet in 2000.
Right.
But then, 2 years later, received strong reviews for the limited release thriller The Salton Sea.
And his commitment to portraying real figures continued unabated. He played the abstract expressionist painter Willem de Kooning in Pollock in 2000. And then, in sharp contrast, tackled infamous porn star John Holmes in Wonderland in 2003.
Wow, de Kooning to John Holmes.
Exactly. This constant shifting of genre and subject matter just demonstrates this restless artistic spirit that absolutely refused to be pigeonholed by Hollywood. Reputation paradox.
Okay, now we really have to address the difficult reputation that dogged him throughout his life. The sources are filled with directors who basically vowed never to work with him again.
Yeah, the negative accounts are severe, and they definitely impacted his professional standing. You consider director John Frankenheimer, who worked with him on that troubled set of The Island of Dr. Moreau in '96. Frankenheimer stated publicly, "I don't like Val Kilmer, I don't like his work ethic, and I don't want to be associated with him ever again." Pretty blunt.
Wow. Joel Schumacher called him childish and impossible. Richard Stanley, the initial director of Moreau, who got fired early on, recalled that Kilmer's arrival was immediately followed by this massive argument over costume design.
Right.
It suggests a pattern where Kilmer's uncompromising nature frequently clashed with the collaboration required on a film set.
And this conflict kind of came to a head in that famous quote from his Tombstone co-star Michael Biehn. Biehn stated, "I don't know Kilmer, never met him, never shook his hand. I know Doc Holliday, but I don't know Kilmer."
Okay, but wait, is that a failure of professional collaboration, or is that actually the highest form of praise for a true method actor? That the man disappeared so entirely behind the character, even to his co-stars?
It raises a really fascinating question, doesn't it? About the incompatibility, maybe, of his acting style with blockbuster production. Kilmer's process was intensely internal, intensely private. He focused so deeply on inhabiting Doc Holliday, on that internal authenticity, that he often maintained this almost monastic distance from the reality of the film set. So for collaborators like Biehn, who expected a standard level of professional camaraderie, this aloofness probably read as arrogance or coldness.
But then the narrative is fiercely contradicted by these supportive voices, suggesting this reputation was maybe fundamentally based on misunderstanding his process, or perhaps creative differences that got interpreted as personal antagonism.
That's where the paradox truly deepens. Mira Sorvino, his co-star in At First Sight, explicitly defended him. She stated he was professional and gentlemanly and a terrific actor. Kurt Russell confirmed that his experience on Tombstone was absolutely great. Even Drew Barrymore, who co-starred in the high-pressure environment of Batman Forever, described him as nurturing and kind and safe.
Nurturing, kind, and safe. That's quite different. Perhaps the most illuminating anecdote comes from Hilary Burton, his co-star on the film Bloodworth. This story seems to completely reframe the narrative of his difficulty.
Burton recounted how she found him the sweetest man. She highlighted this specific instance where Kilmer, sensitive to the context of the scene, unilaterally cut a gratuitous sex scene they were scheduled to film. Decided it didn't serve the story.
He cut the scene.
Cut the scene. Changed it instead to a scene where their characters were simply eating barbecued ribs. Burton stated, "I felt so safe and cared for by that man. That movie was a magical experience."
That detail feels critical. It suggests that maybe his difficulty was often an unwavering demand for artistic integrity and respect, particularly towards his co-stars, even if it meant challenging the director or the script.
Seems the people who valued the art above the ego often praised his commitment.
So the film that, by all rights, should have heralded his major return to mainstream critical acclaim was the 2005 action comedy Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, opposite Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah, his performance as Gay Perry, the hard-boiled private investigator. It earned him a Satellite Award for Best Supporting Actor. The film was this enormous critical darling, won the Overlooked Film of the Year award from the Phoenix Film Critics Society. It was sharp, unique, and saw him deliver one of his best comedic performances, really.
Yet, despite all that critical consensus, the film only got a limited release and failed to generate the momentum needed for a full comeback.
Pretty much, which led to some serious speculation within the industry about why Kilmer couldn't sustain a major career trajectory in the 2000s.
The publication Film Inc. articulated the harsh questions Hollywood was asking, speculating on whether he was, quote, too chubby or had simply burned too many bridges.
Oof. Yeah, that harsh assessment really highlights the unforgiving nature of the movie machine, doesn't it? For an actor who put so much of his self-worth into the craft, speculation about his physical appearance or his past conflicts just demonstrates how professional relationships and marketability often override sheer talent in Hollywood. He was an uncompromising artist in a system that really demands maximum compliance.
Even so, he remained a presence in unexpected places, reuniting with Tony Scott for Deja Vu in 2006, and providing the voice of KITT for the Knight Rider TV pilot and series.
Yeah, a role he took uncredited, apparently honoring the mysterious spirit of the original show. Still finding ways to work, even unconventionally.
Okay, moving into his final years, Val Kilmer shifted focus away from mainstream blockbusters toward these intensely personal creative projects, his deeply held faith, and then, tragically, the health crisis that would define this final chapter.
He was really proving that his identity as an artist extended far beyond just the confines of acting. He was perpetually creating, driven by that same inner fire that had defined him since Gilliard.
His passion project, which consumed years of his life, was centered on a single towering American historical figure, Mark Twain.
Right. He developed and starred in the one-man stage show Citizen Twain, starting around 2012. He later directed and released it as the film Cinema Twain. This project was profoundly personal. It explored the often overlooked relationship between Mark Twain and Mary Baker Eddy, the founder of Christian Science. So this stage work served as this essential link between his artistic drive and his spiritual convictions.
It was a genuine labor of love that brought him full circle, really, back to his theatrical roots.
Absolutely. After performing the show at William Woods University in Missouri, he was awarded an honorary doctorate in recognition of his creative abilities and his contributions to art and theater, end quote. And beyond this, he maintained his multifaceted artistry, remained an avid musician, released a demo album called Sessions with Mick, continued his work as a painter and photographer, just always creating.
And this same restless energy seemed to extend to global and national activism, too. The sources show he often placed himself right on the front lines of humanitarian issues.
Yeah, his public service resume is pretty extensive. In 1998, he traveled to Iraq with AmeriCares for the first U.S. humanitarian airlift there since 1990.
Wow.
He actively worked on Hurricane Katrina relief efforts. And drawing upon his heritage, he was a strong supporter of Native American affairs. This commitment even spilled briefly into politics. In 2010, he seriously considered running for governor of New Mexico, where he lived. He was clearly a man who felt compelled to use his platform for genuine causes.
But this period is also tragically defined by his quiet, years-long struggle against throat cancer, a fight made profoundly complex by his Christian Science faith.
Yeah, the physical struggle began around 2014. He started losing his voice, had to cancel a Citizen Twain show. He noticed a lump, and his health deteriorated to the point where he was hospitalized in early 2015 after vomiting blood.
At the time, though, his public statements were quite confusing, weren't they? And, for many, contradictory. He initially denied all the rumors of tumors or operations.
Right, and that public denial stemmed directly from his lifelong Christian Science faith. Central to the religion is the reliance on spiritual healing. So, adhering to those theological principles, he chose to refer to the diagnosis publicly as the suggestion of throat cancer. He actively avoided using the conventional medical term, which his faith dictates is sort of an error of mortal mind, not a physical reality.
However, despite this deep spiritual conviction, he did eventually concede to traditional medical care, including chemotherapy and 2 tracheotomies. This must have been a monumental choice, especially considering his lifelong adherence to his faith.
Oh, incredibly difficult, one imagines. Made at the explicit request of his children, apparently. He ultimately underwent chemotherapy and the tracheal procedures, which were conventionally against his deep-seated religious beliefs. And the consequences for his primary artistic tool were just devastating. The tracheal procedure severely damaged his vocal cords, reducing his voice to this permanent rasp.
Right.
To communicate, he often had to use an electric voice box, a device he'd plug into his trachea to modulate his speech. While he reported being cancer-free about 4 years later, the damage and the reliance on medical intervention, including a feeding tube, continued.
The loss of his voice created this seemingly impossible barrier for an actor. Yet, his commitment to performance drove him toward one of the most intriguing technological solutions we've seen in recent cinematic history: digital voice recreation.
Yeah, the convergence of art and tech came in 2021. Kilmer partnered with Synantic, a London-based software company specializing in artificial intelligence voice modeling. The goal was, essentially, to digitally recreate the smooth, versatile speaking voice he had lost.
How does that process even work? Creating over 40 vocal models sounds incredibly complex.
It is a painstaking process. Synantic used archive recordings of Kilmer's voice throughout his career, film dialogue, interviews, outtakes, to train their AI. This involved feeding the algorithm hours and hours of material to analyze the nuances of his unique cadence, pitch, emotion, timbre, all of it. By creating over 40 distinct models, they were able to refine the digital output to a synthetic voice that captured the emotional range and clarity of his pre-illness self, ready for use in future independent projects. It was literally an attempt to reclaim his fundamental tool of artistry through technology.
This groundbreaking work led many people, myself included, to assume the AI voice would be used for his final major film appearance, reprising his iconic role as Iceman in Top Gun: Maverick in 2022.
That's the persistent narrative, yeah. But the film's creative team actually clarified the technology used. The director, Joseph Kosinski, confirmed they did not use the Synantic AI for Iceman's dialogue.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Instead, Kilmer insisted on using his actual post-tracheotomy voice, which was then digitally altered just for clarity in the film. The choice was incredibly powerful, wasn't it? Even though he had this AI replacement available, he chose to use his actual surviving voice for the character. It added this profound layer of emotional truth to that scene with Tom Cruise.
Absolutely. And the most personal view into his entire career and health struggle came with the 2021 documentary Val, which chronicled his life through decades of his own personal footage.
The documentary premiered to major critical acclaim, won 2 Critics' Choice Documentary Awards, including Most Compelling Documentary Subject. It provided this unprecedented window into his commitment, his family life, the physical cost of his artistic journey. It served as a really powerful, moving capstone, narrated partially by his son, Jack, reading his father's words aloud.
Val Kilmer died on April 1st, 2025 in Los Angeles. He was 65. And the physical complexity that really marked his life was reflected in the medical circumstances of his passing.
Yeah, he died from pneumonia. The death certificate provided a full accounting of the underlying factors that contributed to his passing, all stemming from that decade-long battle with cancer and its treatments. Things like acute hypoxemic respiratory failure, chronic respiratory failure, squamous cell carcinoma on the base of his tongue, malnutrition, and tracheocutaneous fistula. He was cremated on April 7th.
The sources include a truly poignant detail about his final hours, which links his death right back to his lifelong passion for the cinematic arts.
Yeah, just hours before he passed away, he'd actually been scheduled to make an appearance at the Beverly Hills Film Festival. Right up until the very end, he was committed to being present in the world of film and art. The industry tributes that followed, especially from some of those who flashed with him over the years, offer this final synthesis of his complex character. They acknowledge the difficulty, but universally praise the talent.
Michael Mann, who directed him in Heat, remarked that he was consistently amazed by Kilmer's range, his variability, and that powerful, almost turbulent current of character expression he brought to every single role. Mann called the news of his death tremendously sad.
Francis Ford Coppola, the director he turned down early in his career but later worked with on Twixt in 2011, offered really warm praise, called Kilmer a wonderful person to work with and a joy to know.
Tom Cruise, his longtime friend and, professional rival in Top Gun, honored him at CinemaCon with a moment of silence. Said Kilmer loved movies and he gave a lot to all of us, acknowledging their shared history and Kilmer's substantial contribution.
Oliver Stone offered perhaps the most comprehensive summary of the Kilmer persona, didn't he? Describing him as turbulent, contradictory, and tortured. But crucially, Stone stressed that Kilmer was always exciting on film, always exciting and fresh. He called Kilmer an iconoclast and rebel in his acting, and argued that his uniqueness will be profoundly missed.
And returning to The Doors, drummer John Densmore, who witnessed Kilmer's radical immersion firsthand, he felt that Kilmer's channeling of Jim Morrison was so frighteningly accurate it gave me the creeps on set. And he strongly argued Kilmer should have received a Best Actor Oscar nomination for that performance.
That enduring conviction from his collaborators, even decades later, it speaks volumes about the quality of his work, doesn't it?
It really does. The totality of his career and commitment ultimately earned him recognition beyond just performance trophies, too. In 2022, he received the Humanitarian Award at the Satellite Awards, acknowledging his decades of charitable work. It seems the man who spent a lifetime wrestling with internal artistic demons and external professional friction eventually received recognition for his kindness and advocacy as well.
And this entire deep dive, it really reveals that Val Kilmer's story is just defined by an uncompromising artistic drive. It was the central, complicated force behind his entire life. It's the same force that made him practice Chopin for months for a single scene in Tombstone and memorize hundreds of songs to become Jim Morrison. That fierce, unwavering dedication fueled his legendary performances, but also, inevitably, created the impossible standards and the friction that contributed to that difficult reputation.
We've seen how his life was really a testament to total dedication, even when that dedication clashed with the realities of Hollywood or ultimately the constraints of his own physical health.
It raises an important question, I think, for you, the listener, to consider as you reflect on his complex legacy. What is the core purpose, the creative challenge, or the dedicated pursuit in your own life that is worth that level of intense, uncompromising focus, despite whatever personal or professional cost it might carry? This deep dive shows that sometimes maybe that complexity is exactly what makes the art endure.